No principle of discovery in the theoretical sciences rises to a higher priority than predictive ability. Predictive ability, not so much in the sense of foretelling the future, but the ability to explain and even better to logically deduce known facts from a new vantage point. Our subject in this series covers hundreds of mythic and symbolic archetypes, and we unabashedly claim that every theme you would expect to find based on the events reconstructed here, you will find globally and in extraordinary detail. In previous segments, we briefly reviewed the role of the planet Saturn in the ancient creation legend, the myths of the Golden Age, Saturn as archaic sun god, a revolving crescent on Saturn cast by light from our sun, and supporting it all, the polar configuration of planets, remembered as the Great Conjunction or Perfect Conjunction of primeval times, ending in the catastrophic breakdown of the configuration, the global source of doomsday anxiety. In the full reconstruction, the two most active bodies are the planets Venus and Mars, whose stories we've barely begun to enumerate in this series. The advantage we hold with this reconstruction is that we can see the global symbolism in the light of a concrete celestial provocation. From that vantage point, the archetypes will fall into place like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. In fact, all of the recognized archetypes around the mother goddess and the warrior hero, plus many more that the experts themselves have missed, will trace to two planets in the polar configuration and their unique juxtaposition in world traditions. As a first step, we only need acknowledge the planetary identity of the mother goddess. The most fully documented ancient cultures consistently identify the goddess with just one of 5 visible planets, Venus, an enigma for which there is no accepted explanation. Ancient astronomers make crystal clear that Venus is the prototypical star goddess, consistently linked to the central, radiant eye, heart, or soul of the primeval sun, the very figure we've identified as the planet Saturn. A preposterous idea, but a historical fact coming down to us from the birthplace of astronomy in ancient Mesopotamia. Our reconstruction will show that myth-making imagination saw in the luminous streamers of the discharging Venus the animating life of the archaic sun god. But a critical turn occurred with the removal or departure of Venus from its appointed place. In the mythic language, this signified the death or disempowerment of the universal sovereign. That departure meant the loss of his animated eye, heart, and soul. With this departure, the discharged streamers of Venus took on a disordered, filamentary appearance, provoking global superstitions and astrological beliefs about comets, all traceable to the mythic prototype of comets, the planet Venus. These very events will fully resolve a universal paradox. The lovely goddess transformed into the angry or lamenting goddess, raging in the sky, her wildly disheveled hair trailing behind her. That is the archetypal image of the great comet, often portrayed as the flame-like hair of an angry goddess or of a raging lion. A serpentine or dragon-like form of the goddess recorded around the world will trace to the very same events, the spiraling form taken by the departing eye, heart, and soul. Always this female serpent form will lead us back to Venus as the great comet. The subjects are immense, and the brief notes we presented here as a first glimpse can only open the door to the vast library of evidence. We'll take up this evidence one theme at a time. But to hold the door open, we'll also need to see the connection of the universal goddess to the cosmic warrior. And to see this connection in its remarkably concrete texture, where everything has a visible referent. That will require us to look closely at the role of Mars in the evolution of the polar configuration, our next subject. The mythic archetype of a great ancestral warrior or hero is surely the most popular mythic theme of all time. And yet, thousands of years after the first expressions of the archetype, can anyone rightfully claim to have penetrated the mystery? Even today, despite countless volumes written on the subject, a convincing answer seems entirely out of reach. What human experience could have inspired a worldwide image of a superhero rescuing the world from chaos monsters? That's just one of the globally repeated mysteries. Why the birth of this great ancestor from the womb of a revered mother goddess? Why the exposure or abandonment of the hero at birth? Or the murder or displacement of his father? Why was the god himself so frequently identified as an unerring arrow, sword, spear, or hammer? A weapon that turns out to be a cosmic thunderbolt. Yes, a thunderbolt, but with no similarity to lightning in our sky today. Absolutely nothing makes sense under any familiar references, and yet the themes are so fully connected that one archetypal attribute leads seamlessly to another, then another. There must be an explanation. And yet common beliefs will not permit an explanation. That's the logical contradiction arising from today's accepted stories of human history and planetary history. The problem lies in an unsupported theoretical assumption. The assumption is, as today, so before. Well, that's a trap. It holds our attention on today's uneventful solar system, even as the human record speaks with 1,000 voices for a violent and catastrophic planetary history. In popular accounts, the prominent heroes are quasi-divine, big and strong men who rescue humanity from chaos monsters. One astronomical tradition after another names this warrior figure as the planet Mars. The farther back we go, the more the divine or celestial character of the hero stands out. Such Egyptian warrior figures as Shu or Horus or Amon were originally celestial figures beyond a shadow of a doubt, but later localized through regional storytelling. The same can be said of the ancient Sumerian and Akkadian counterparts, Dumuzi or Tammuz, the Mars gods Ningersu or Nergal, and even Gilgamesh. Eventually, localized cult practices transformed such figures into legendary ancestors of those recounting the stories. Our answer to the dilemma lies in a testable reconstruction of things never imagined in our time. The reconstruction leads us back to a gathering of planets close to Earth, all events occurring prior to the present organization of the solar system. Planets have not always moved on their present courses. Our subject is the ancient polar configuration, where the warrior hero finds a full and complete explanation in the activity of the dark, reddish, innermost sphere. The planet Mars was the centerpiece of the cosmic thunderbolt. The testability of this reconstruction lies in the contribution of visible forms and explicit sequences of events, all testifying to the global substructure of human memory. What will happen to our understanding of human history if it can be seen beyond any reasonable doubt that the warrior-hero archetype requires celestial events having no parallel in natural experience today? What does it mean when the warrior king on earth symbolically dons as his crown the revered glory of heaven? That event meant the king's conjunction with and marriage to the archetypal star goddess, identifiable as the planet Venus. Many parallel symbols are equally important. Just one example is the identification of the exploding radiance, the essential quality of the star goddess, as the warrior king's shield, mythically his gift from the goddess. That identification magically confirms the local king as an incarnation or avatar of a celestial prototype, the warrior king as mythic protector and owner of the terrifying glory. That's what the word hero literally means. Name any broadly repeated theme attached to the hero archetype. Observe its place in the reconstruction, and you'll find additional themes that are just as explicit. No room for ambiguity or for simply making up explanations. Ask the question, does any popular explanation actually work? In the context of our reconstruction, the required patterns must show up, globally, if the events occurred. We'll follow that logic to further conclusions in our next segment. In these discourses, we followed the evolution of a planetary configuration close to Earth stretching across the ancient sky. Centered at the North Celestial Pole, it remained stationary for an extended period at this position. That's the underlying nature of the primeval sun remembered around the world. We've noted that the named planets progressively emerged from a dusty plasma cloud, identified in mythic accounts as the Great Sea of Primeval Chaos. The differentiation of the planets and their observed movements in relation to each other and the electrical activity between these bodies provided the core content of ancient creation mythology. In the original accounts, creation meant events visible to humans on Earth. We've named 3 planets in the mythic Great Conjunction based on recorded astronomical traditions that trace to the birth of astronomy in ancient Mesopotamia. Saturn is the overarching luminary, named as the primeval sun. Venus is Mother Goddess and radiant eye, heart, and soul. And Mars is the dark, reddish, innermost body, the child in the womb of the goddess, the pupil of the feminine eye of the primeval sun. We followed the emergence of a triangular form recalled as the first form, the luminous seed of creation, and we've identified this unique form as the concrete celestial referent for the popular threefold goddess, three-faced goddess, or 3 goddesses in one. We've noted as well the explosive discharge activity associated with this triangular form and the essential role of the discharge ejecta as the mythic primeval matter of creation, the very material from which in the creation stories the gods were said to have constructed a great citadel in the heavens, the legendary homeland of the gods. Through local storytelling and reenactments across the centuries, this celestial dwelling came to be remembered as the ancestral homeland of every nation recounting these events. These core themes of an archetypal memory have taken us to the critical moment at which a bright crescent appeared on the gas giant Saturn due to light from the sun. This moment provides an extraordinary test of the reconstruction as a whole. Once we place the named bodies in 3-dimensional space, centered at the celestial pole, and allow for an illuminated crescent on Saturn, an inescapable conclusion will follow. The crescent must have rotated visually with the rotation of the Earth in a precise relationship to a cycle of day and night, with no counterpart and no analogy in anything occurring today. A star in the center of a rotating crescent. The image is recorded around the world. a crescent which, given the circumpolar placement, must have turned around the polar center in a daily cycle of brightening and dimming. No ambiguity, no compromise allowed. When seen with eyes wide open, how credible are the popular claims of historians, archaeologists, and comparative mythologists when they identify the symbolic crescent as our moon? By what reasoning would ancient sky worshippers have extravagantly and irrationally placed our little crescent moon into a configuration never seen but recorded independently by humans around the world? Always keep in mind that the mythic crescent does not stand alone. The great star of Venus in the center of the crescent is just one enigma in a crowd of unsolved mysteries. A particularly powerful addition comes from the mythic world mountain, a column of fire and light rising along the polar axis to pierce the crescent. That's what gave the crescent its mythic identity as the cleft peak, the horned peak, the twin arms or twin pillars of the sky. A subject we'll review one theme at a time. In its juxtaposition with the revolving crescent, the polar mountain adds crucially to the midnight appearance of the crescent in the most celebrated moment in the archaic daily cycle. No contrived reconstruction will ever account for this symmetry, and that's why a radical break from common understanding is so essential, as we intend to make crystal clear in the episodes to follow.